Alright, I have a lot of videos I want to do today. I pretty much cleaned this whole place. This is my dad's place. I pretty much cleaned it all. Took me like 8 hours. I'm gonna get some money for that, that's for sure. Anyway, I'm reading a book by Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, which is called 1,000 Plateaus. I have the Anti-Oedipus, but I decided to read the 1,000 Plateaus first. What is this like? This kind of post-structuralist and deconstructionist kind of thing. If you read Difference by Derrida, or if you read any kind of deconstruction, or Poststructuralism of Gilles Deleuze, or Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, I feel like that when you go from following, it's somewhat in the phenomenology and existentialism, but following all of that, it's like a big huge fleeing, I guess, within postmodernists, and I'm talking in the continental tradition. Sorry about the noise of the construction, by the way. I don't know if you can hear that or not. But I'm reading that. I'm reading the 1,000 Plateaus, and it just kind of seems like that following that phenomenological and existentialist movements, you get this kind of, when you get postmodernism, deconstruction, and post-structuralism, you kind of shift away. They all shift away from traditional philosophy. In traditional philosophy and modern philosophy, Descartes, all of those, they are Hume, and all the way back to antiquity, Roman and Greek antiquity. You have this kind of where it's centered on a certain concept, or you'll see philosophers who are realists or objectivists. Then you'll see others who are anti-realists or idealists. If you read Plato, you have it's centered on a certain concept. If you read Hume, when he talks about certain things, it kind of centers on a certain concept. If you read, even Husserl or Heidegger, they are centered on a certain concept. Then if you read Derrida or Deleuze and Guattari, I haven't read Deleuze's Logic of Sense or his Difference and Repetition. I do have Difference and Repetition though, which I need to read. But I want to read the 1,000 Plateaus first, because that sounds like a really, really awesome book from what I've seen. But I'm kind of getting through the first part, the introduction, called the rhizome. They call it a introduction just because they're keeping the terms of having a introduction when it's not really any intro, when you really can read this whole thing in any real order that you want. It's not there's no order that you have to read this in. But in that book, you have planes of consistency, dimensions, and plateaus. You have all these things, and you have assemblages and all these different abstract concepts. When there's no hierarchy, there's no strata of concepts in Deleuze and Guattari. There's no real kind of centering. It's non-centric at all. There's no. And I was watching a video of. I posted a video down there, but he used a certain kind of. Mexicans. They're building stuff over there. It's kind of distracting. He used a word like it's almost anti-philosophy. I want to think about that for one thing. Now, if we think about the word anti-philosophy with relation to Derrida or Deleuze and Guattari, we kind of, I guess, I guess I've seen that in Derrida and Deleuze and Guattari are the ones that I've read that do have this kind of non-centric kind of ideas and unwieldy concepts and slippery concepts and these things that are hard to get a hold of conceptually. And I think that part of what's going on, I think, in Deleuze and Guattari is that they are. I think that I believe it was Michel Foucault who said in the introduction to Anti-Oedipus that or maybe it was somebody else, or in the foreword or something. It said you have to read this as if it is a art. So that's part of this. I think part of Deleuze and Guattari's writing is you have to look at it as somewhat of a art, I guess, and not looking for any kind of hierarchy or strata or central points or beginnings and ends and all this stuff. All these centered things that you find in traditional philosophy, that you are missing the point. And that, I think, can be characterized as anti-philosophy because we are not... I guess I want to think about the rhizome for a bit. A rhizome is like a root that is under all of the soil, and it's a point that can connect to any other point. So, the plant, like a plant rhizome, like if you a rhizome of a root. A rhizome is pretty much a analogy referring to a root, and a ginger root would be a good example of this. But you can connect any point to any other point. So if you have this root under the soil, then this root can connect to other roots under it, and it's like a lateral kind of thing. But there's no centricity in it or anything in it. No, that itself, like Deleuze and Guattari talk about the tree, the normal root, the tree, I guess, or that goes upward like that and branches out, that is hierarchical, and it's like strata. If we look at that as like a certain kind of concept or group of concepts or argument, that's that root. But a rhizome goes like this, and there's no real centricity at all anywhere, because any point can connect to any other point, and there's no central arguments in this book. There's no central arguments in a thousand plateaus. There's no real arguments, but there's unwieldy concepts. It's kind of hard thing to get a hold of. In my opinion, even harder than Derrida. But I guess when I read Derrida's essay Différance, I was thinking, this is like a good model for. I had a video where I talked about that. I was saying, this is a pretty good model for how we should live our life. It's a pretty good model because. That's pretty much that. I have. I'll post that one down there too. I mean, it's not looking for any real meaning. I guess it's not really. It's understanding, for one thing, ambiguity, I guess, but it's more like we could look at it in more of the lens of Derrida than that. You know, if we use the word absurdity or ambiguity, we are gonna kind of revert to existentialism. But I guess my point here is I want to have like a little. I'm having like a little philosophical discussion. Is if we're trying to, in philosophy, if we're trying to find a meaning for our lives, find if there's a God, and find out things about ourselves, then should we look at it in terms of this kind of root thing, you know, where it's full of, has a centered argument, centered concepts, is hierarchical, has strata, and it's very easy to understand. But the problem with that is that can't connect to other regimes of thought. It can't connect to other things. Like the rhizome, if it goes like this, it can connect to other things like very easily. It's kind of hard for me to get out what I'm really trying to say, but it's just kind of, I think if we do philosophy in the manner of looking for a central concept, if we do that, you know, looking for some kind of central kind of concept, central argument, it's gonna end up, you know, with us being on certain people with certain ideas being on one side, and certain people with certain ideas being on the other, and it's gonna lead to some different issues. But then if we have this kind of not vacuous concepts like in Derrida, but unwieldy concepts. When in difference we have difference and difference. It differs infinitely for having meaning, as well as it differs, within the concept of same. So I want to talk more on this later, but I just want to think about that. Like, for philosophy, if we're looking for these concepts or these questions of God, our lives and meaning of our lives, as well as who we are, maybe it would be better if we did this in more of a post-structuralist kind of light, like maybe in more of a light, if we kind of somewhat, kind of have this kind of deconstructionist or kind of post-structuralist way of life, I guess. I mean, that's kind of a difficult way to discuss. It's kind of hard for me to kind of discuss this because it's kind of not easy to clarify what I mean, but maybe it would be better and better for understanding things if we did have certain understandings about life, and then we could have answers in using, like, let's say deconstruction or Derrida's or Deleuze and Guattari's rhizome as a model for how we understand our lives and all this stuff, and meaning in the world and all this stuff and who we are, then maybe we would just have a certain answer in that, even though at the same time we wouldn't really have a concrete traditional answer. We would thus still have a answer.